Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hare Om. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Tapaswadhyaya Shushrusha Krishna Puja Ratam Munim Vishvesham Ishtadam Mande Parivarat Chakravartinam. I heartily welcome Professor Vamsee Juluri to the Krishna Bhakti Peetha's lecture on American confusion. This most terrifying question, it is not simply American confusion, it is becoming Indian confusion also. No more we are Indians, purely Indians. We need to understand the cultural invasion that we are witnessing today. Not only today, last 100 years, it is the thing happening in India also. There is a concerted effort to destroy the basic dharma element in India, of the people of India. In Vishnu Tattva Nirnaya, there is an argument. Charvakas say, no, there is no dharma. There is no dharma, no adharma. Everything is human thing. Whatever you do is okay. There is no dharma, no adharma. You need not worry about Sandhya Vandana or any ethics for that matter. So, Jaitirtha answers it. If you don't accept dharma or adharma or anything such a regulating ethical properties of life, then what will happen? You will not be safe in your own society. There will be a question, why you should not be killed? If there is no dharma, there is no adharma. If no adharma arises by killing you, why should not I kill you? Such a question arises. So if there is no dharma and adharma, our society will not survive simply. Like that is happening in the Western world, especially the America, US, and United States of America. At the end, Jaitirtha says, okay, even there may not be dharma, there may be dharma, don't worry about this thing. But the very notion of dharma itself is protecting the society. Some people, they don't resort to crimes because they are afraid of adharma. Nothing may not happen, no, nothing may happen even if they commit some crime in the Paraloka. But this Loka, something will happen. They should be worried about things. Not every crime in the world can be stopped with the mere notion of constitution or the criminal code of the country. It is the moral code that protects the society. That's why it is called dharma. Dharana dharma ityaho. Dharmo dharayate praja. Dharma is the social code, ethics and all culture. Everything is there. It protects the people, it protects the culture, it protects the history of particular nation. Manusmriti says, what is dharma? Dharma, he says, ahimsa satyam asteyam shaucham indriya nigraha edam samasikam dharmam chaturvarane abravin manoh. Dharma is not simply doing puja and sporting tilak, chandan and visiting temples, etc. It is about the samanya dharma. He is speaking the ahimsa, satya, asteya, non-greediness, shaucha, cleanliness, indriya nigraha. These are the utmost important dharmas in our life that will keep you afloat, that will keep you sane. That is the notion of dharma in India. And Jaitirtha also said the same thing 600 years ago. The Charvaka is trying to finish this dharma. Tadutsadhana eva parasya prayasaha. So it was the same situation 600 years ago, and it's the same, and it is increasing now. People are really trying very hard to kill, destroy, shatter this dharma. Because of this dharma, we are surviving for the last 7,000 or 8,000 from 8,000 years. The Indian civilization is still alive because of this dharma. Without this notion of dharma, nothing would have survived for this long duration. So it is very important to understand the concept of dharma and to strive for the upkeeping of this dharma. That's why we have arranged this lecture of Professor Vamsee Juluri, who is well-known media studies professor in University of San Francisco at Berkeley, and he is a well-known author of Rearming Hinduism and all other books. He is also fiction writer. The stories of Jalapuram, etc., they're based on Hampi, our own Hampi. These are the books he has written, and many more. Well-known critic of the role of media. Already we had some discussions with all our students how the media is trying to distort the culture and the satya of the nation. So I heartily welcome Professor Juluri, and I welcome all of you who are here for a wonderful lecture and a discussion later on with all of our friends. Dr. Pradosh is there, Dr. Srinidhi is there, Srinivas is there, and Mamta is there, and our Bindusara, and our Urja is there, and Darshana, and Sri Krishna Kumar, all our friends are here, and Dr. Juluri's family is here. I welcome all of you, and hope we will have a wonderful interaction session with Professor Juluri.
Thank you for a very kind introduction, and I'm still reeling with the positive energy from the previous talk. The students, it's not easy holding the attention of students, and it somehow, because these are two different worlds. Like your question was a very apt place to, I think, pause there and continue here. These are two different worlds, epistemologically, socially, and here we are. So I'll quickly recap for those of you who are just joining us. So in my previous talk, I spoke about media studies and philosophy, where I just briefly talked about mass communication and mass media, how they are influencing society, and how there is very organized propaganda being directed against Sanatana Dharma, Hindus in India. And I talked about how I have been opposing it or studying it or critiquing it largely from the Western academic point of view, which is the media studies point of view. So media studies started off in 1920s as a part of Western social science, which is a field of psychology, political science. So their philosophical assumption is that the world is out there, it is knowable, and the way you produce knowledge is by studying something and objectively and getting evidence. So that is how they did surveys, experiments, all the research about media, whether it has influence or not, and so on. Then starting around 1970s, and that is also a source of the American confusion, Indian confusion to the present talk. Starting in the 70s, a lot of philosophers and political activists in America and Europe started questioning the old approach. They said, there is no such thing really as objective or universal knowledge. Everything is based on your point of view. It is all relativism. So, in the beginning, it served a purpose, because what the Western society was claiming as universal knowledge actually was not really universal. Maybe some claims were, but some claims were clearly very specific to their own experience as Europeans, as Christians, as victims or agents of their own history. So, 70s, 80s, different groups of people in Western societies started arguing that we need to look at the point of view, not just what you say is true, there's only your white male truth. we must now also look at the truth of women and African Americans and Indians, Hindus, everybody. Now, initially that I think played a useful role to some extent, but what has happened is that whole approach has now become the mainstream in American academia, in American schools, and also increasingly in Indian schools and Indian government policies, NGOs, media. And it is this basic assumption that somehow everything is relative, there is no need, there is no truth, there is no evidence, everything is a matter of perspective. But then, only the perspective of those who have been designated as victim groups, whether they are really victims or they are actually very powerful people, does not matter. Only the people we say are victims, their perspectives matter. Everything else does not matter. So, you asked a wonderful question at the end of the other talk. So I ended the other talk with this hope that there will be some kind of a dialogue, conversation and harmony between two different traditions. One is the Western social science tradition in which I work, in which I try to kind of bring in a little bit of our experience. And then what is happening in institutions like this and many other institutions in Bharat today, which is the revival of Indian knowledge systems, Sanskritam, etc. And both are, and this is wonderful, I'm glad it is happening. But I think the challenge is, how can this knowledge help us fight the confusion or turmoil that is already happening and it is coming at us more and more? So to answer your question a little bit, which was, are the tools there in our knowledge? Or are we, really just doing some cosmetic surgery, saying, oh no, don't worry, whatever problem comes to us, the solution is there, it is somehow there in our ancestral traditions. In some ways, yes, it is there. I mean, in the sense, it is Sanatana Dharma. I think we call it Sanatana for a reason. It is perennial. But there is the Desakala also. In my book, Rehoming Hinduism, it's in two parts. First part is Desakala Dosha. Second part is Sanatana Dharma. So, how do we deal with this particular Desakala problems of this American confusion or postmodernism or propaganda, terrorism, all these things? I think one challenge is that, and here I should mention when Acharya was speaking, I think the work of S.N. Balagangadhara and the Ghent School, Ghent, Belgium, is very useful. There's a book called As Others See Us, which is like a simple version of his more famous books. As Others See Us is like a conversation between 3 or 4 modern Indians, modern Hindus in particular, who are all talking about these issues. What is Hinduism? Is there really some Hinduism, or is it just an imaginary category? And when you read this book and start to think about it, the main challenge we find is the common everyday idea of Hinduism that many of us have is really a kind of a Protestant Christian template, which we've absorbed. And it's very important to understand these very small differences. Because, see, the way, and Balagangadhara says this, and I think this is true, the way Sanatana Dharma keeps going is really through vertical continuity, one generation to the other. And this is true of many polytheistic indigenous societies. There's a very great book written by a Native American, quote unquote, Red Indian scholar, Wayne DeLoria. It's called God is Red. Okay. So, because they were called Red Indians, he said, okay, God is red, So, 1970s he wrote this book. That book helped me understand what we are facing as Hindus today a lot. So I think the main challenge, putting all these different things together, S.N. Balagangadhara, Wayne DeLoria, generational change and so on, I think from the little that I do know about Indian knowledge systems, and at my other talk yesterday, they presented me with a nice textbook, very professionally done, very clearly organized, which is Indian knowledge systems textbook. So it starts with Vedas, Upanishads, how it's organized, So you have a clear understanding, basic understanding of what these texts are. Then they go to, I think, applications, and then maths and Ayurveda, astrology, things like that. But again, the part about humanities, and they have a chapter called Humanities, which is very, very limited. So, in a sense, it's not surprising that fields like sociology and etc. or media studies for the matter are not necessarily a part of our knowledge traditions because they came out of the Western experience. They came out of the West and particularly the Christian worldview, trying to study other cultures and put everything because for them everything was God's plan. Then it became Darwin's plan or natural selection's plan. Then it became Marx and exploitation's plan. Today it has become identity plan. So the West is always forcefully trying to perceive the world with all its diversity and complexity and time dimension into a flat horizontal picture, like a selfie. The West selfie is poisonous. It's like a monster selfie, I think. They want to take one picture and then they'll say, oh, okay, so you have Hinduism. This is your holy book. This is your holy temple. And we are telling you that your caste system is the foundation of your religion. Everything they want to tell us. And all the time we are defending it, saying, oh, no, this is not what it really means. So, for example, there is in Western parents, Western Hindu parents, they do a lot of reading about, why we do certain traditions. There's a nice little book published by the Chinmaya people, called Why Do We? It's a nice book, like why do we light a lamp, why do we... But the real question that has to be asked is, why do we even ask why do we? And for that we have to say, why do they? Why do they think and talk about it the way they do, and how have we internalized that? So, to summarize this point, and then maybe I can say more things in response. We can maybe keep it more interactional. Balagangadhara talks about something very interesting. He says, in a sense, we don't have a worldview. He says the worldview is a fairly Western or Christian concept. And in some ways, and what we do basically is one generation to another, we pass on practices. So we pass on practices. So that is why my parents took me when I was small to Mantralayam. One of the fondest memories I have bathing in the Tungabhadra. And we had the great good fortune that when he was about 9 years old, we went to Hampi, visited Navavrindavan. So it's just a practice, And my imagination of telling me stories. Last week, before we came to Bengaluru, we in Pune, Pune sort of my base now in India, whenever I come, we went to the Raghavendra Swami local Bharat Swami, and things like that. And I was really profoundly moved. And he said, who are these beings or these divinities or these incarnate sacred things, essences, they're just there, and wherever we go, we go through our modern life, Kali Yuga, travails, somehow it feels like they're looking at us with absolute clarity over many janmas or many generations. I think one of the useful tricks I'm thinking is when we talk about multiple janmas, modern mind finds it hard to believe. But very objectively, scientifically, we can talk about multiple generations. And I'm very, very convinced that what we need to do is start drawing our children's attention more and more to our tatas and patis and amamas and nanamas, because try to picture what your grandparents experienced when they were your age. There was no phones, there were not these many cars, there were so many more trees. Okay, this horrible noise was not there. And you're very lucky still because you're in a land where you can still eat the same kind of food they eat, you speak the same bhasha, you celebrate same festivals, you share the same reverence. So, we just have to keep practicing that. As far as this epistemological resource for creating a theory, I don't think we can create a society of a mass theory for a mass society. But we have to understand the mass society we are all forced into accurately. For that we need not Indology but really Westology. And that is where I think, the Native American scholars and Balagangadhara, all of this is useful for us. But of course, as we do that, I think it is very helpful to also learn, like when the moment Acharya said Jai Tirtha, I said, okay, so in a sense there is an issue here with Charvakaism. It's not just Marx or, Christianity. So there is this thing. So how do we confront that. What is the similarities, differences between Charvaka and say modern day atheism or Richard Dawkins or people like that? So just questions arising naturally. So I'll pause with that and take some questions and thoughts.
I would like to add something. Not more of a question, but just a comment. So, since I come from media studies again, I've been studying it for 5 years, and I'm in public relations now. So it's like an extended version of that. I think systematically we are trained to break down our thoughts or whatever we've been doing, and whatever he said about generalizing or categorizing it in buckets, saying this is this, and I think the way we think itself or the way we function or our philosophy from the previous session, it's not. I think we don't think in that way. Like our thought process itself, whether it's in our DNA or the way we live our lifestyle, it's not in those lines as the West. But I think thanks to the modern day and age that we live in, Indians as a whole would find that, or Hindus as a whole would find that to be much more convenient than this. So I think they're moving towards convenience rather than being in the system that we've been always. And that necessarily does not mean that it's regressive or anything. I think progressive and regressive would be very conditional that way, because what is progressive to us as Indians or probably to people who are living in Karnataka might not be as progressive to people living in Jammu or in California. So that is what I think.
That's very useful observation, and why should there be a universal definition of progressivism? Progressivism is now, it's become the name of colonization. I mean, I was very proud of being, because I learned so much, because the strange thing is this progressivism or Marxism and all had the effect of making me feel more rooted. I mean, and not in a superficial way, not to say that, oh, we had social justice 2000 years ago or we invented democracy, not in that way. But somehow I felt, because in the 90s, you see the context, India was going through this big capitalist revolution. So everybody was cheering free markets and globalization and all this stuff. So at that time, I felt somehow, the Frankfurt School or Marxism or cultural studies gave me the tools to understand what was happening. But so to that extent, I related to progressivism, but then itself I had my reservations, because I could see how false the progressive, especially the Indian or South Asian progressives claims were about Rama or Krishna, or trying to say that we are not indigenous, we are oppressors, all these lies. So I think the idea of a relative progressivism is very, very relevant. You mentioned the word convenience. It's actually very interesting. I think there is and it leads us to the question of confusion also. I think a prime way in which confusion is expressing itself, say in our generation, so people in their 30s, 40s, maybe who are parents or soon to be parents, is that they have used convenience as an excuse to destroy continuity. You could make a choice, right? You could say, yes, okay, I like convenience. Who doesn't? You all want. I have a joke for it. I say KYC. Everybody thinks know your customer. I say no, it's Kali Yuga concession. So, okay, I may not be able to practice certain traditions with the rigor of my father or grandfather or my ancestors. But whatever little I have started doing again, and whatever I can encourage my son and the next generation to do, I'm happy with that. So we can take our conveniences, but where is it that we are cutting things? Okay? I don't see anybody complaining about inconvenience when they flock to the shopping mall every Saturday in that crowd and pay. There's a mall in Bangalore where they said premium parking 1,000 rupees. So I was just thinking, so he's parking here for convenience or for the conspicuous display of his, whatever, 1 crore car or whatever. So we are living in this strange age where people will travel, they will spend money, they will go through all the inconvenience for cricket match or the latest Bollywood movie, or so many silly things like that. But one small thing like, doing a Shraddha Karyakrama with devotion, there oh man, it's not convenient, I need a shortcut. But God is in my heart, it's okay, So the God is not just in the heart, God or whatever. So I think that is where the confusion dilemma is really playing out, Where are we taking our shortcuts, particularly in India? Yeah. I'd love to know some of your thoughts on what you perceive as American confusion.
Hare Krishna. So before I share my thoughts, I would like to give a background, not as a personal thing, but just to tell you from where I'm coming, where I'm sharing my thoughts from. So I worked with HSBC, and by God's grace, HSBC sent me abroad, and I had an opportunity to live in Dubai and in Hong Kong. And the grass is always greener on the other side. I always wanted to learn Sanskritam, and I wanted to come back to India because I saw this. I saw that, this is the confusion that is there in the Western world. Although it was an Asian country, but it was a Western world. I came back here and I am doing what I want to do, which is Sanskrit studies. I did my Haridasa science under Professor Bharat, and now I am learning Sanskritam and in tutelage of Professor Pandurangi sir. But when I see the other side of what is there in India, I find that there must be a reason where America is able to not only keep our children, they go there and they don't want to come back. And when I look at my youngsters now, I am telling the same thing. What I did 10 years back was come back to India and live here. And after having lived here and experienced society over here, I'm a single lady, I feel I was better off over there. As far as personal life is concerned, in society, I'm talking about society. So, my question is, if the children are going there and staying there, what is it? I have not gone to America yet. What is it that across the board, you see them from anywhere, whether you engineering or whether they go for medicine or whether they go for IT or anything, they don't come back and they don't want to come back. What is that one thing, since you have lived in America for 30 years, what is it, that one thing which kept you there, one? And two is, what do you think is it that attracts so many people to America? In spite of the confusion, I agree that there is drugs over there, there is no background. And recently I attended a marriage function in Bangalore, and there were relatives from America who had come. And when the proceedings were going on, they just looked at us and they said, in America, when we have a marriage, traditional marriage, there is pin drop silence. So, yes, there is a confusion, but there is a confusion, as Sir said, even in India. So, what is the solution? I think it's a question mark, and it may be at an individual level. As he said, convenience and what matters to you most. But those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a wonderful. It's our own lived experiences, as I say. I know it sounds like a cliche, but when you see a life story expressed, then you suddenly realize that these are not abstract concepts. When you do social science or humanities or Indian knowledge, ultimately, we are all participating in our devotion to Swajanodhara. He was bringing us together. My father used to sing Palaya in the evenings when I was a kid. And later I found the recording now. So that's that one word, Krishna, the attractor. He just charms us and brings us closer and closer. I don't know why I'm thinking of him when I should be thinking about America and our difficulties, but he has taken me there. True Krishna Padamastu, he has made me start by thinking of him and that word.
That may be the only solution.
Yeah, it is coming down to that. Just, God's ancestors, nature, and children. Future gods, future ancestors, future friends of nature, restorers of Dharma. So what is the Akarshana Shakti of America in a sense? What you said is Yeah, it is there. I mean, I see so many. I know everyone wants to go to America. Everyone wants to, and I can't be judgmental because I did go there myself. Um, but somehow I've had the good fortune of coming back very frequently and for very long stretches, and that was facilitated by 2 or 3 blessings. One is professionally being in academia, you do get long leaves and sabbaticals every now and then. That has helped. And the second is family. Being blessed with a family which shares this love for India and coming back frequently and spending time here and so on. But it is challenging because I see it with so many friends because they're so busy and they make it's such a chore. The India trip, it is very routine. Okay, you come for a couple of weeks, but even then a lot of it seems to go in shopping. Going to malls, traffic, doing this, doing that, meeting up with school friends. And then sometimes elders say, my grandchildren came, all they did was play with their Switch or phone, And, but a lot of second generation children abroad do, I think, go through this phase sometimes when they're 18 or 20, of wanting to just discover and see their homeland for themselves, their roots. Different people react in different ways. Of late, a lot of people have made a nice career out of it. They come back, they go back and say, they take over from where the missionaries left off and say, especially, unfortunately, a lot of people go to social sciences. That's what is happening, or NGOs. They all decide that they're going to save India from itself by, blaming Hinduism. Then others are indifferent to it. So, but there are a lot of second generation Hindus who are reviving into what they can. I think the challenge here is, yes, I mean, in some ways, life is tougher here. But there, I think the bigger challenge, which may increasingly happen here too, is the title of the talk, which is American Confusion. Last few days, there's more and more arguments being made about the crisis of mental health among American teenagers. So Jonathan Haidt, has written 2 or 3 books, and then the psychologist Jean Twenge, whose books on generations I like to read a lot. So they're finding all objective indicators say that the current Gen Z, that is people born between 1995 to 2010, they are experiencing depression, anxiety, etc. And it's not just that they're reporting it more. Objective indicators like self-harm, attempted self-harm, hospitalization, all of these are showing. There's huge peaks starting around 2013 or so, and they all see the coincidence in the sense 2011, 12, 13 is when this iPhone hit society, and this generation hit its teenage years. So, if you look at just the last 4 generations, I think all the data they're sharing, till Gen X, as they call it, the people born in the 60s, 70s, it's at one level. But people born after 1980 onwards, you see a lot of similarities there. Mental health problems, polarization, profound confusion. And I think one diagnosis of this I have again is that America had some vertical to whether it was Christianity or Protestantism or patriotism. They had some continuity going generation to generation. But the last 20, 30 years, that has broken so much. So the millennials were the first generation, I understand, who were raised by parents, many of whom were no longer Christians, they were atheists. And then now you have people who have lost even that thread. And so many different things happening there in terms of the data, in terms of confusion. I think one of the biggest manifestations of that is many of them don't want to have children. So here also. Yeah. And in China, they're making a political statement. I believe they call it the last generation. So they've got prosperity, but somehow they don't see the reason. Yeah, they think it's difficult, I mean, it's true. The economy is tough. The environment is getting destroyed. Competitiveness. There are a lot of reasons, which make us think very hard about the future. But then, I think what happens is when you have a society where the majority, demographically or culturally, stops thinking about any kind of future, it is going to be very depressing. I mean, now when I was 15, 20, I also did not think about being a parent, or very few people at that age too. But eventually, we were blessed, it happened. And what I want us to recognize is that there is a lot of deliberate propaganda at work in America and here, where we are not like any school you go to, modern school. The school doesn't teach you like, what do you want to be when you grow up. Nobody says dad or mom. Or no one wants to be the performer of my ancestors' rituals. No one will tell you, hey, look, when you get old, yes, you will have to deal with your parents and it will be sad and everything. But then, there are these traditions which work in mysterious ways. You will feel more strongly with your departed ancestors again. You will see it as a continuity. No one tells that to children, right? So I think that is the crisis here too, that we have lost the Sanatana Dharma sense of time, which is eternal, lived, connected to nature and immediate ancestors and descendants. And instead we are believing an artificial construct of time, which was invented by the Christians or the Romans or the British. So I'm rambling a little bit, but hopefully these are some of the solutions. Yes, people are very attracted to America, and again I am appalled that even though so many people come from here to America, they're not trained. They're not prepared to succeed there as dignified human beings. I'm sorry, because this is what is happening. Last 4 or 5 years, because there have been so many attacks on Hindu students and Hinduism in American universities. I said, man, you are supposed to be the biggest source of foreign revenue to all these colleges. Now, I remember about 10-15 years ago when Chinese student recruitment increased in American universities, the Chinese embassy would place copies of their newspapers in the campuses. And in the 1990s, liberal American professors would all the time say free Tibet. No American university will now say free Tibet. So, people have exercised influence. Other countries have exercised influence when they go to Western societies, because these are multicultural immigrant societies. It is true, and some of them abuse it. I don't want to mention names, but we, as Indians, modern Indians, we all go there. But why are we just accepting this dummy role there? We don't have to cause nuisance, sure, that's not our style. Like that was asked in the earlier thing, we are not violent, we are not disruptive, we can't agitate, fine. But take the best of what the land offers. Okay, it's saying it will give you a good job and the freedom to pursue a life as you want. Well, you should be focusing on that. Whether you're there or here or going back and forth, restore the vertical. And if America gives you the base to do it, so be it. And as far as India is concerned, yes, the place is still so precious, but it is scary to think of how it's being destroyed. 1990s to 2010s, I mean, I used to lament every tree being cut, every boulder or lake being destroyed. And now it's reaching a point where it's like cold indifference because it's sad. But what is it that protected all these natural things? It was gods. People had the belief or faith that this tree has a god, that stone has a god. And you have a modern, supposedly scientific tempered government which brainwashes people into saying, no, this tree is not a god, it's just a tree. You can cut it for development and you plant another one, it's fine. I remember a few years ago I visited this Hindu Holocaust Museum near Pune, started by François Gauthier, and they had paintings of the Goa Inquisition. And the first thing that struck me was that you have these Portuguese colonizers and the missionaries breaking the tulsi kotas. I mean, how can a small little plant threaten you, So, anyway, so I think, yesterday, just going from the talk in Jayanagar to MG Road Brigade Road was culture shock. So, even 10-20 years ago to now, I can see the difference in the MG Road area. So, confusion. Thank you.
So, when you are saying that the millennial generation destroyed, and before that Christianity was vertical, and patriotism, Christianity was vertical, and after some time it got destroyed. So I remember watching one sitcom named Young Sheldon, and in that sitcom, one thing I observed is that when he was little, he used to he praises communism, and it becomes a threat to his home. He praises the communism in the TV interview, and after that the whole family got scared, and they tried to put the American national flag in front of their home. thinking that people will destroy them because they praise the communism. Yes. So now in universities, communism is in majoritarian view. So in the name of diversity centers, people are actually backing the communism. So what do you feel that changed America, rejecting communism to accepting communism and again pushing the communism in the universities? When we get the answer, I think we will get the answer to Indian problems also.
I will offer an Indian perspective on young Sheldon and your question about Christianity and communism and so on. See, I think Christianity is not a true vertical in the sense of, by default, it is a vertical for the West. As in, it is some culture which has given them at least 2-3 generations of continuity at a time. I don't think it has been as fluid and long, because, and this is actually what I write about, I just published an article called Generational Change in Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilizations. And that I argued that, a civilizational conflict today should also be seen in terms of different cultures or traditions and attitude to time. And, Christianity and communism and Islam, I think all have this idea of a break with the past. Like Venkat Tulipala writes in his book, Creating a New Medina, a lot of these Muslim intellectuals in the 1940s were arguing for the creation of Pakistan. It was not a subaltern, oppressed people argument. Everyone thinks that Pakistan felt oppressed, Muslims felt oppressed, so they asked for their homeland. They were openly making an imperialist argument, which is what Tulipala writes in his book. They were arguing that, look, we had a global vision, worldview. Go back to earlier question, right? Islam had a true global vision, which is Western capitalism is failed, communism is good, but it doesn't quite solve the problem. Islam is true communism, Islam is the answer for all the world's problems. This is what the Pakistani scholars were saying, pro-Pakistan scholars were saying at that time. So the word Jahiliya. So in that book, Venkat talks about the concept of Jahiliya, this idea that before the birth of their faith, the world was primitive, it was barbaric, Jahil. Sometimes on Twitter they keep calling Hindus that, So, similarly, Christians also had that idea, like, before a certain time people were lost, they were not saved, etc. And now, from the Stalin and the Mao revolution, where the Maoists trained the children to denounce their parents, something like that is happening in America today. So, the way I see it, because I think we are just used to thinking of our verticals being longer, because we don't have this idea of rejecting the past at any point. It's Sanatana, it's just how long ago time you're saying, when was Vedas written, was this an interpolation, when did temple worship begin? Who cares? At least for my fathers felt a certain way, did some things in temple, I feel a certain way. Now, the temples we go to, some things may change and grow, whatever, but it's just going on and on. We don't reject the past. That is why I think we still have a more positive view of the future in spite of it all, compared to China and the West. So, to address this question of Christianity and communism, so what I've noticed is this. I should mention this book. It's called Fantasyland. Acharya, when you asked me to speak about American confusion, I was thinking of the book Fantasyland, how America went haywire. So it's a very interesting premise. So this author says that it goes back to the early Protestant roots of America. See, because if you look at Europeans, if you say 2000 years, and let's say maybe about 60 generations or something, 20 centuries, okay, 3 generations, or 60 to 80 generations. At some point, as the Roman religion and Greek religion was destroyed, they all broke from their past. The memory vanished. And then they were all being taught one generation after another, the world will end soon. Okay? So you accept, repent, convert, whatever. So as soon as the world ends, the second coming, all those things will happen. You will go to heaven forever. It was not happening. Every few centuries, they would have a mass hysteria. Somebody would say, oh yeah, doomsday is here, Y2K is here. They would go through that. So what they've done is they have created an artificial vertical. They're very good at organizing, building institutions, right? So they kept the thing going and going, and before the big Protestant Martin Luther revolution, obviously there was many small things. But after the 1450s, there was a big break. Now, in this book, Fantasyland, what he says is, because America was settled by all these ultra-conservative Protestants, these Calvinists and people like that. So these guys were very determined to reject any kind of authority, including Catholic authority, right? And that is why now, Vamsee Juluri and all these scholars are saying all this anti-Brahmin hate in academia or in media goes back to, the Protestant ideologists, who had this hatred for Catholic priesthood as well as anti-Semitism, rabbis and Jews. So what they say about Brahmins, a lot of it is just what they were saying about Jews or Catholic priests. So this Protestant spirit of anything goes, sab chalta hai, that was the whole idea, like who needs a priest to tell me? I will read my book and make up my own truth. So this man, this author in Fantasyland says, so 1850s, from 1850s to about early 1900s, this was taking place in these waves. It would be this periodic uprising, great awakening, which was usually religious, some kind of religious mania, evangelism, revival, whatever. Then post 20s, 30s, it started becoming more secular. So I think what has happened, is that every time there is this wave of rejecting all authority, breaking whatever is the dominant thing, and and then again slowly a conservative, thing becoming dominant in America. So if you look at the last 70, 80 years of American history, and this is something I think I'm familiar with because this is the media age, 1950s to 1980s. I think Sheldon's childhood is 1980s, right? So that was peak Cold War conservatism in America was strong. They were never underdogs, They were very strong, 50s to 80s. And when I went in the 90s, I was first in a very conservative state. And there was some ignorance, but there were also some nice people and they were warm, they had some values, all that. But what has happened is from the 90s to now, in 20, 30 years, the conservatives have been left with not a spot of earth to stand on. I mean, they still have wealth and power, sure. But the way this other side has triumphed, and people say it started with Bill Clinton in the 1990s, politically, he pulled the rug from everybody else's feet. And so what you see now essentially is pure power. So it's conservatism, not even with the good things like some values and heritage and patriotism or some Christian morality, etc. It is conservatism in the sense of just pure conserving power and control, disguised by liberal platitudes and ideology. So what is, I find it reluctant to call it communism in a sense, because at least in the old days when Indian communists used to say communism, every family used to have one communist, they were idealistic, they really believed in fighting poverty or something. These guys are super riches. I don't even know if they're really communists. By the way, there's a great book by Asra Nomani, called, I think it's called Woke Jihad or something like that, where she's talking about essentially what we have is a transnational capitalist elite talking communist talking points, but espousing Islamic imperialist agenda. So that is the crisis in America. So very quickly, I think the way it happened was even in the 80s, like in young children, you see that it's a very conservative Christian society that boy is growing up in, and suddenly now it has completely shifted now in the last 20, 30 years. And that is happening in India too. So, the problem is when we try to debate it as a left or right, and that is why I keep telling a lot of people, don't call yourself RW or right wing and things like that. What happens is you're falling into a position that, the systems of control, whether it's the corporations or the church or the US government or, these organizations have set for you. They'll put you on one side, and for some time that side will be dominant. They're just going back and forth. That's why it's not a genuine vertical. But I think we are blessed to have a longer memory to draw on. So what I wrote in my article is that, I see the world different civilizations sort of coalescing, at least for survival, into two broad camps. One I call the Sino-Islamo-Western memory block. The other I call the Hindu-Judeo-Western memory block. So what I mean by that is, so you have one cluster of civilizations which deeply believe in breaking from the past. The Chinese had that Maoist cultural revolution, they broke from their past. Islam had that concept of Jahiliyyah. And you have the younger generations in the West who are now at the peak of breaking from the past. They just hate the past, they hate the parents. Somebody was telling me, a little kid was telling me a few months ago, oh man, our ancestors have, destroyed the world, I have no future. Like Greta, they're saying, When I hear the word ancestors, I think of, some rishis and people not even harming a worm. But now for these young kids, ancestor means could be somebody who's just 5 years older than them. And they're somehow responsible for climate change, animal extinction, capitalist inequality, Islamophobia, something, everything. So I think that is one cluster. So there is a powerful force, China, there's another powerful force, which is global Islam. Although things are changing in Islamic countries, a lot of interesting realignments are happening. And I have a feeling, India will play a good role in that if we are smart. Then the other cluster, Hindu-Judeo-Western, is new. It has never existed in a sense, but it, as a matter of survival, I think we have to lead. And my feeling is maybe a small amount of people in the Jewish community and maybe even small amount of people in maybe the Christian community or whatever will understand that we are looking at survival and a decent life for descendants. Now, the other half is not even thinking about descendants. So, how will they have dharma? How will they have a vision? And it is a kind of chronological narcissism that's happening in the name of social justice. And they are talking about, yes, poverty and all these things, but then, they're thinking that they're not thinking about how the kind of solutions to poverty and injustice offered by Marxism or, the woke jihad complex is actually going to solve anything. So I think we have the burden or the gift or the duty of carrying a very old and precious memory. We won't know a lot of it, right? I mean, our IPS will restore some of it. But what I think everyone can do and should do is convey the beauty. I hope every child in Bengaluru, for example, will start mapping out what this place was. When I was small, there was never a building bigger than a temple Gopuram. You just didn't see anything bigger than a Gopuram. That's how South India was, at least. So, things are changing, but let's not, we have to live with change, yes, but I don't think we should blindly just say oh, we must change, change and adapt, otherwise, we'll perish. Hey, we are going to perish anyway if we don't keep some traditions and sentiments for our past and preserve some natural habitat. We are going to perish. All that is going to be left of us is like, those guys in the Matrix movie. We just become mere bodies, being used to code, and even that will go, I'm told, with AI. So I think memory is the battleground, and that is what will hopefully end the confusion and the polarization taking place, in America today and coming to India also.
I have been in the academia of public policy and management for some time now, especially public health and social issues in public health. So the points you made about the positive spaces that, for example, relativism or critical studies provided is a matter of discussion in these areas as in any other area. And so, for example, in management studies, people talk about the important space that critical studies or relativism provided for an Indian approach to management, for example, so that you don't need to be under the influence of a universal Western model of how to build organizations or economy, so you can have your own spaces and bring up the voice. At the same time, you talked about the issues that it could provide because of the confusion of this relativism. So, for example, we see this in public health, where people were talking about gender equity, and when the third gender question came up, so the problem was, okay, now you're actually undermining the earlier efforts for gender equity, because we now don't have enough voice to actually talk about one gender. Now it has become more of identity. So you lose that space to actually fight. So, but in the context of the Hinduism and the Sanatana Dharma kind of an approach, so this relativism or the space that it provides does give a kind of a hook for people to get into that discourse, and but it does lead to confusion, I understand. So how do we actually handle this difficult question? So so that leads me to the second question, which is that, based primarily on the problem that you mentioned, that there is one system which is grounded on rejection and the other that's on continuity. So when the two are coming together, it obviously creates confusion. So therefore, does it then mean that we probably need to reject whatever the systems that are actually founded on rejection? So you focus only on continuing traditions, which would then mean that you're actually rejecting, probably for the right reason, the modern development paradigms, modern science and technology paradigms. Would that be the solution going forward?
What will it all mean for policy, for public health, and so on? So can we reject the rejection culture, the time or ancestral continuity rejection systems? I don't know. Again, I think the very premise of restoring and preserving ancestral continuities is so microcosmic. In a sense, it's going to vary from family to family, neighborhood to neighborhood. What I can suggest is that what might be very important is getting a sense of how to apply this particular framework or this particular framing to each of our life situations and to each of our professional domains of expertise. I mean, the example you gave about this conflict between gender equity and feminism on the one hand, and now this sort of proliferation of epistemic confusion or whatever around the question of gender. I know a lot of Western conservatives are writing about this quite a bit. I think J.K. Rowling was the first famous celebrity there who sort of talked about it, and then she was, maligned. And now with sports, women in sports, like in swimming, I think in other sports also, there's a lot of controversies happening in the West. So this, it is sad. 20, 30 years ago, it was like, there was all this talk about the need to make things better for women because of how they suffered under patriarchy. And very 20 years later now, women are, treated with utmost contempt and violence in the name of some other new thing. So again, what I said earlier, when I see this pattern of Western societies playing, this thing seems to keep getting played out. Every 2-3 generations, things swing like this, conservative from left to right, it keeps going. And the way in which this swing happens is this trafficking in identities. The way they keep inventing identities. By the way, I know I should mention this at this point. In California, the last 2-3 years, there was a huge, uproar in the Hindu community because of this bill called SB 403. It was supposed to outlaw caste discrimination. And the kind of examples they were coming up with about caste discrimination, it's like, somebody will come in Silicon Valley, they'll say hi and pat you on the back, but they're really checking for thread. And then people are saying, everybody's wearing that thread, what does it mean? And everybody gets, or if you ask for vegetarian food, that could be code. So all sorts of, and that has been critiqued, all these lobby driven surveys which claim there's an outbreak of caste discrimination in America. The bad methodology, bad intent, all of that. But what you see essentially is an attempt to create a new marketplace of identities there. Because what they were proposing essentially, because a lot of, especially second, third generation Americans don't even know their so-called caste identity or whatever. They probably don't even know the towns where their parents were born in, So what was actually happening is again what the Western conservatives are critiquing, this DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, complex business. And then what was happening and may still happen, who knows, in California, is what we now know the British did 100 years ago. You create a bureaucracy, you start assigning labels to people, and then you make people behave in certain ways and say, look, you're behaving badly, it's because of your religion, or your gurus. You know? So that's why I find propaganda very useful to understanding this. So yeah, to answer your question, I think maybe it's very hard to think of solutions in a horizontal global scale, but maybe by practicing vertical sensibilities or recognitions meticulously in the time that we have, and empowering the next generation to grow up with this idea that there are lives before them, there may well be lives after them, and a thread, or are all our gods and gurus. Then in their own way they will start to flip or find some kind of a balance. So I don't know, for me personally, it's very hard for me to think of mass solutions of any kind. What we can do is to reduce the harm that is being done to the vertical by the mass mania of bureaucracy, of nationalism even, that's why, I think Balgangadhar's work is interesting, because he's critiquing not only, the West and its colonialism and the colonialism of India seculars, but also the kind of colonialism among people who are otherwise patriotic and, care about Sanatana Dharma. So, that's why, this right-wingism also should be avoided a little bit. Maybe that's one way to deal with confusion now. Is confusion has its place, in poetry and in sentiments, in emotion, song, drama, etc. Feel it, appropriate rasa and auditya, what a useful set of concepts. At least as a media professor, the little I know of, our knowledge traditions, I think these two terms can help us manage so much, appropriateness and the ability to just feel things. And I mentioned this in my talk yesterday, the movie Kantara. It was so powerful, people loved it, because let's face it, that what it was speaking to was not a theoretical label about identity or anything like that. People just felt it. It was, a father-son bond, for example, mediated by the gods. So the gods mediating us, are we mediating the gods? So it is more and more rasa-filled experiences of wonder, joy. I think that will help us flip this somehow. One can hope. We are in a great place to hope.
So awareness could be the solution.
Awareness, indeed. Be aware not just of others around you, but others who are not physically there, your ancestors and your descendants.
And we need Bill Ackman. We need Tesla.
I don't know. Beautifully said. Yes.
It's the beginning.
Yeah, beginning of clarity is confusion.
So I hope no more questions. We are in India, so we don't understand the certain differences about the conservatism and the American, so conservative or democratic or something, and the churning that is happening in America. For me at least, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden and all, Donald Trump, everybody seems to be same for me. Because their ideology seems to be same. Maybe Trump may be very too far extreme side, but others also, I thought they were the same. So,
Yatra alpiyam sah dosha.
Yatra alpiyam sah dosha sah swapakshah. when there are so very small, very few mistakes, then we can accept that paksha. But that is not for the time being. So even in America, all the people, they went for the maybe now they are maybe third generation or fourth generation, and I don't know how they are feeling and how they are behaving, because we are not there. We are only the second-hand informants, or we have the second-hand information. But we will have one more lecture soon about the horrors of US and Western dreams, gleanings from the first-hand experience of an America-born Indian. We will have it, so we can wait for some more weeks for it to happen. There are confusions and there are problems. Earlier they were too much focusing on the technology or studies. Now they are diversifying to the other fields. Maybe someone is dancing, someone is singing. All these things are cinema, direction, etc. Earlier they were only technocrats. Somebody is scientist, doctor, or something like that. Now it is diversifying. Days are not far away from hearing in news that Indian man mass killing in America because of the confusion that is happening in America. I don't know. So what we need to do is to educate our younger generations the essence of dharma, how to behave. All this ahimsa, satya, asti, etc., and all our ethical stuff is there. They should be taught from the very childhood, rather than being fed with Korean pop dramas or whatever American things. So our younger generation, they should be well versed in Sanskrit studies. At least they will understand or appreciate what we are doing. Otherwise, they are totally disconnected from what Vidyapitas are teaching, or what our Sanatana Dharma or Vedic Dharma teaches. The essence of the Sanatana Dharma, they are totally disconnected from this problem. That's why we need both technology of the modern world as well as the ethics and the culture of our ancient world. Otherwise, we will be out soon. So one portion, I will conclude my few words with one portion of Manusmriti. So who were the people of Iran, Iraq, and all other countries, China, etc.? Who are these people? Manusmriti says these were the Kshatriyas. Our Kshatriyas, the descendants of Anudruhyu of the Yayatis lineage, they spread over Pratichim Dishamashritaha. Lecharaktha Sarve Pratichim Dishamashritaha. They were all the kings of these western countries, west of India. They were ruling the countries, and that's why Sanskrit has spread there. Otherwise, there is no chance Sanskrit could spread to the faraway nations. If you ask Turkmenistan, what is the stan there? It is sthana. It is the influence of Sanskrit there. Very clear. All these countries up to Germany and France, the language was so much influenced by Sanskrit. Still we find so much of influences, traces of influences. So these people were there. But what happened to them? What happened when they live there for generations? Shanakaistu kriyalopat imah kshatriya jatayah vrushalattvam gataloke brahmana darshanayana cha. Slowly, from the second generation, third generation, fourth generation, they all become Risharas because of two things. There was nobody to teach them Brahmana Darshanayanacha, and because of the lack of the Karmanusthana. That is the caution that our Dharma Shastras give us to stay here in India. Krishna Sarastu Charadi Bhargoyatra Swabhavataha Sadneyo Yadniyo Deshaha Mleksha Desha Swatah Param Etan Dvijatayo Deshan Samshrayaram Prayatnataha Shudrastu Yasmin Kasminva Nivasayat Vrutikarshitaha. The Dvijati is, they should strive to try forcefully to live here in the country where the Krishna Mriga moves naturally. That is the Yajniya Desha. And all other countries are Mleksha Deshas. So there is no Varnashram Dharma, so you should not live there. That is the caution the Dharma Shastra has given us. So it is very important to accept and adopt this advice of Dharma Shastra for the sake of continuation of the tradition. If all of us will go to America, what will happen? The culturally elite people, everybody is annoyed with the Indian system, so everybody will move to America. What will happen to India? Again, there will be cultural vacuum, and it will be very easy for the Adhanika Charvakas to occupy and invade the India and make it a slave again, mental slave again. So it is very important thing that we have got from the first-hand experiences of Professor Vamsee Juluri. I thank him for our invitation and interacting with all our younger generation here. Professor Nagasampige Acharya, Director of Purnapratna Samshodhana Mandir, is here. I request him to honor Professor Vamsee Juluri for his lecture. It is very great opportunity to be here on the occasion of his Aradhana, and Purnapratna Samshodhana Mandira and Krishna Bhakti Peetha welcome him for always. We hope we will have more understanding the cultural differences between the East and West. Thanks to all. Sarvebhyo Namaha. Krishna Arpanam.